favor. This is one more, please. Hi, and welcome to, I would say, another episode of Otra, por favor. But this time, I am not alone, and I brought backup with me. In a little bit, after they introduce themselves and they let us know what platforms they work with and what type of content they do. This is going to be a collaboration I've been looking forward to doing for a while. I appreciate everyone in this table. I've gotten to know some people here personally, some people here, probably a couple of times we hung out, but this is one where we actually spent more than an hour together. So thank you guys for being here. And this is also going to be, this episode is going to be to build, the Austin media. We all have our point of views. We all have our different way of working. But at the end of the day, we want this to be as constructive as possible, because I have love for the city and also have love for what's going on and what we do. So I'm a fan of each and every one of you guys. So let's start with the introductions. And also, my name is Richie, if you guys don't know it. Let's start with that side first, and then we'll make our own this way. So.
Sounds good, man. So, my name's Paul, and my buddy Logan Bartlett and I, we cover the Austin FC team with the Verde podcast. And pretty much it's just two dudes vibing and talking a little bit about some Chelsea FC, Austin, Austin Rise, UT football occasionally. But other than that, I'll pass it off to Zach.
My name is Zac Graham. I host the North End podcast with my best friend, Ian Michaud. So it's the best friend podcast over here on this corner of the table, covering Austin FC, everything that surrounds it, and a lot of nonsense as well when you tune into the North End. So, Richie, appreciate the invite today.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley. I feel very weird not sitting next to Landon, or like
that was on purpose.
I know.
I've taken him hostage. He's mine.
Jeremiah Bentley. I barely tolerate Landon Cotham on the Moon Tower Soccer podcast, but
definitely not best friends.
Despite our lack of friendship, we've managed to do this for a long time. So really appreciate you inviting us to come do this and hang out with this group of guys, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you.
And I'm Eric Goodman. I write the Verde Report and the Austin Chronicle. And we have a lot of fun covering the team. Happy to be here, Richard.
Thank you.
I'm Landon. I'm on Jeremiah's podcast.
I'm Moisés Chiullán. I'm a contributing editor for the Verde All Day Substack newsletter, and I do Emergency Podcast, an Austin FC podcast, which is a very long title.
But we figured
Phil West shit the most Phil West shit in the world, which is exactly why it has to be that long and why an emergency podcast very rarely actually behaves like an emergency podcast.
I think we've been filled with a lot of emergency here and there. But before we go forward, Duke, he's behind and making sure everything's good, the mastermind. So thank you. Appreciate you coming. And Rigo, he's at home taking a day off, so enjoy it. He's our collaborator to Another Por Favor.
You saying enjoy being without Rigo?
No, enjoy your evening.
Okay, all right. To Rigo, not all right.
To Rigo. Enjoy your evening. But that too. I got love for that guy. So the first question I have for you guys is I want to talk a little bit about, the changes that we've had. Probably my point of view, the biggest change in Austin FC so far is the change of coach after Josh Wolf's pretty much tenure was over, before the season was over. I want to hear your thoughts on Nico Estévez, but not just him coming in, but also what the team has done to sort of build some kind of culture, letting them know like, hey, this is Austin FC and this is who the people are behind this whole community. So I want to hear your thoughts. Let's start with whoever wants to jump in and just let me know what you guys think.
I'll jump in here. In terms of the Nico hire, I think along with a lot of the fan base, was relatively underwhelmed by just the name value of the signing, especially because Rodolfo Borrell comes out unprompted in his press conference that he called after he fired Josh Wolf and drops the names you can't believe on us once
25.
again. Yeah, 25. Yeah, names that you wouldn't believe. And, I think Lobar in the Verde Pendant kind of made the joke that, it's a name I couldn't believe, but like in the wrong direction, because Nico was just fired from one of our rivals like 6 months ago or something like that. And a rival that finished below us in a season that I don't think anybody that is a fan of the Verde and Black thought was acceptable or was satisfied with. But taken a little bit of a deep breath, right? Letting it kind of simmer for the last week or so. I'm obviously willing to give Nico a chance. I still believe very much in Rodolfo Borrell, the decisions that he has made. But that, to this point, has been from a player personnel standpoint. This is his first, front office or coaching staff hire. So I'm excited for the prospects of kind of this new era, like we've kind of coined it, Austin FC 2.0 on the podcast. But it was not what I was expecting. That day when that news came across, it was like, oh, well, there it is.
Yeah, and, I think it's a very telling signing in the sense, and you look at where Austin FC is going into year number 5. Austin's not the new kid on the block anymore. We've been around, there's now San Diego, Charlotte, teams have joined the league. Austin's no longer the new kid. And what I think this signing tells you is that this whole concept that a lot of us who are interested in soccer in this town were optimistic about, that Austin could kind of become like the Green Bay Packers of MLS, where like, yes, it's a smaller market, but this is going to be the market that is just so committed to their team that it's going to feel like a big market soccer team. And I think, whether it's unfortunate or not, but you look at this hire and it's kind of a reality check that no, Austin is going to be one of those small market MLS teams that is going to try to, bring in a coach that just knows the fundamentals of MLS, is going to work with the youth and try to make a pipeline from the academy to the senior team. And you're probably not going to see an Olivier Giroud or somebody when we first brought on Rodolfo Borrell that popped into my mind. It was like, hey, maybe Mo Salah at the end of his career, somebody that Borrell has worked with. I just don't think that that's going to be in the cards at this point, and that's okay in a sense, but it's not what a lot of people maybe had in mind in terms of the optimism surrounding Austin, the city's first major league sports team with all this excitement around it.
And as somebody who, at the press conference, along with my esteemed colleague, asked the question about the names you wouldn't believe thing, I got told afterward, oh man, you really went for it. And I was like, I feel like I kind of asked it about the most friendly way I could.
The most diplomatic way it could have been asked.
I felt like I was at the United Nations. And Eric, however, went directly for the throat, which I admire and respect. But the thing that I think prepared me for this was literally just shooting the shit with Phil in the press box. At various points, we found ourselves going, so how long is Josh going to last? So is it going to be Monday? Is it going to be Wednesday? After various games for weeks and weeks. And after Estévez got fired, I distinctly remember Phil joking, so who do you think the new coach is going to be? Nico Estévez. He's available. And I actually thought about it. And I went, well, he's used to the climate. He's used to the heat. He's from the Berhalter coaching tree, which is something I have an allergic level reaction to. But knowing that his coaching career began a decade in advance of getting anywhere near Greg Berhalter, thinking about it for a longer period of time than I think a lot of people were, it didn't hit me like a ton of bricks the way that I think it did a lot of people. And also knowing that he came from within supporter group culture at Valencia, that's also a big differentiator. There are various different things that can be said about what COVID did to disrupt the league, to disrupt the history of the club. There were few opportunities for the kind of welcoming committee kind of thing that happened with Estévez for Josh Wolff. Albeit, yes, there was a thing in 2019, but that was before there was a team. That was before there could be that sort of mixer kind of opportunity. So plenty of people hate me for plenty of reasons. But one of the things that I will say is there are certain things that Josh Wolff didn't get the benefit of the doubt and opportunity to do, that now the club is seeing this as a reset, as a recalibration point where they can do these kinds of things. The other layer of that being Josh Wolff, coming from the generation of men's national team players that he does, I feel like was never into this version of supporter group culture. Mm-hmm. Much more the men's national team versus all that South American stuff in terms of what his comfort level was, which is something that I think was baked into him before he even got here. So that, like, the marked difference in the tenor and the energy of Nico Estévez wanting to get in front of as many fans as he could, as soon as he could, is something that I know the knee-jerk reaction among the fan base is probably, yeah, it's a press stunt. Yeah, it was a press stunt. But also, that's a guy who just got fired from a job, who wants to do right and has something to prove himself, like so many players that Austin has picked up before Burrell, since Burrell, Jader Obrian being one. And that's something that I think has me much more on the optimistic side of things, even though, man, the moment we see any lack of flexibility in tactics, that's when those hairs go up on the back of my neck, just like so many of us would see, Josh switching tactics 10 minutes before the end of the game. That's the thing that the first inkling of that the fan base gets, that's when all of the cautious optimism goes to, well, he's the exact same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to build on that. Well, one, I want to say, like, everybody should read Goodman's article. Slightly sarcastic article from last week about the opening press conference. I thought it was well written. But then, like, you read the press release, right, and you're like, if I was a AI PR machine and you fed in, like, here's all the things that people hate about Josh Wolf, like, spit out a press release that speaks to the new coach. Mm-hmm. Like, every one of those, like, bilingual, want to meet the supporters, like, care about the media, like, every one of those things would have been in it. But after watching the press conference, after watching his part of the press conference, we'll talk about Rodolfo Guerrero's reaction to everybody else, maybe. Later, like, watching how Nico dealt with the press, and then, like, listening to the one-on-one interviews that he did, and then, like, hearing from people who went to the fan event, like, it seems genuine. So I believe that it's not just, like, a product of the PR machine of the club, but that's, like, actually who he is and who he believes, more than I definitely did when we got the press releases. So that leaves me encouraged and excited about the future for this club.
The only thing I'll add is that, like, I think we can look at it with both skepticism and, like, genuine belief in what they want to do. And Josh Wolf, like Moisés said, was not, like, during COVID is when this club was being built, not a lot of opportunities for that. Maybe he didn't want to do them and said no to them. I don't believe all of this stuff is, like, Nico Estévez' idea to come out and be around fans. I don't think he's the one pushing for it. But if you take the opportunity to put Josh Wolf or Nico Estévez out in front of a bunch of people, one of them is going to be much more effective and buy himself a lot more rope than the other one would have. And I think that's shown out over the last few days. The proof will be in the pudding. He's only as good as his record. But I think as far as goodwill with the fan base, we can be cynical about it, but I think it's been effective. I think they've done a good job of putting him in front of people and making him likable, and him just being likable.
To add on to that, there was something that I got on background in advance of the fan event from a source that I would trust, and granted this started going around during the fan event too, but the original plan was that the club wanted to put Nico in front of supporter group leadership, and that was it. And Nico interceded and said, no, I want anybody and everybody who wants to show up from the fan base, who can show up on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock, to be able to come out and meet me. I have to be able to be accountable to these people. And, we will see how his relationship with the fan base and openness to interacting with them goes from here. And if that was a one-off, or if that was really the first step of many, where he really wants to directly engage and directly interact with the culture.
And listen, good for Nico Estévez. Like, any of the skepticism surrounding the hire doesn't have, it's all, being set up by what Rodolfo Burrell, advertised. And that it doesn't really help the eventual guy that you hire, which is why, as much as, some of us in media love to have characters that are going to, go out, put themselves out there, say stuff that makes you open your eyes, the reason a lot of people don't in that position is because it does set up this set of expectations that the person that you eventually do hire has a difficulty meeting. So none of this, it's not Nico Estévez' fault that that's what some of the perception was about who the next coach is going to be. But good for Nico. I mean, this is a guy who probably is thrilled to have another chance coaching an MLS club, one with a lot of energy behind it, with somebody who I'm sure he's got a ton of respect for as a sporting director. And he has every reason to be really excited, really motivated to try to connect with the fan base and really do whatever he can to build some goodwill, build some of that positive momentum. And I do think that matters. And, it's so difficult to quantify what fan support and community support really, how that really matters in terms of actually getting results on the field. If you ask Josh Wolf, he would always kind of say the right things, but you could tell that it wasn't a priority of his to have the fans, buying into what the team was doing. Clearly, Nico Estévez is going to do that, and it can't hurt, right? At the end of the day, what he does on the field, we'll be able to judge that when we see it. But in terms of kind of these first impressions, I think he's doing exactly what he should be doing.
Well, I think something that's always important to keep in mind of that this is all within MLS, and that's something that, going back to what you were talking about earlier, Eric, is like we wanted to have this club be like this like beacon of just like, hey, we're doing the best that we can here in the city. The likes of like LAFC, right? Their first signing is Carlos Vela. Their ownership group consists of all these names you wouldn't believe, and it's just like looking at this hire and reminding myself, it's like, that Friday that the news came out, I was like, well, there have been other stories like this in the MLS where a team goes out and hires some no-name, that maybe didn't have the best record coming into that position. And, I'm looking at that team playing in the
I was going to say, are you watching Ben Olsen coach Houston Dynamo right now?
He's playing right now.
Chris Armas with the Rapids as well.
Yeah.
I was going to say Armas with the Rapids is a
Tata
good
Martino
example, too.
as well.
And it's important to remember that, like, in the context of everything with this league and how it operates, you don't need a, home run signing. You just need someone that is willing to do the work, unlock these players the way that we saw Josh do in 22, and hopefully, Nico can get that done.
I think Steve Cherundolo is another interesting example to kind of add to that list of coaches, where he came from USL, right, I believe, in Las Vegas, and the year before LAFC hired him, they had 6 wins. If you go back and look at that roster, I want to say that was probably more on the lack of high-end player personnel for the USL level. If you get a guy who can come in, has a talented enough roster to compete with any team in the league, I think we've seen not just the MLS retreads, but guys getting their first chance at the first division level can have a lot of success. So that's just another thing when I'm listening to Paul talk about that, it kind of, it ups my optimism for the whole situation.
There's, as a Club America fan, whenever their new current coach came in, I was very skeptical of him because I didn't know who he was. I knew he had won the Olympic medal with Brazil, and then I was like, man, but he doesn't have, nobody knows him. But America is known for having a lot of pressure on players and on coaches especially. So when he comes in, he didn't come in like every coach that used to come, like, oh, I'm the boss and here. He came in and built a foundation, but based on, hey, we're a group, and before and after every game, we're going to have to hash everything out in the field, training, whatnot, and win the championship. You can see it from how they played. Whenever lose, it wasn't a thing where, oh man, like this team sucks. They're actually like, you can see something there. But all that camaraderie that they built, by the time we came to the playoffs and La Liguilla in the final against Tigres, I mean, they beat Tigres and they held Tigres. And I mean, Tigres was attacking in the final. It was last December, and they could have been a goal away from, tearing down America in there. But the coach always kept it cool. He's like, hey guys, relax, chill. And I think if Nico's bringing in something to add, and instead of taking away, then everybody's on board for it. Is the moment whenever you're coming in ready to put the rule on, ready to put the belt, and be like, hey guys, this is my way or no way. Like if you don't have flexibility, especially how Austin wants to be as a culture, then it's gonna be hard for you to work in an environment where there's a lot of us that, like, we want something somewhere, we want a team to win, but we also want someone that connects with the team. So we can wiggle both of that, you're gonna be doing well. But I think for me, at the end of the day, is the result. And with Wolf, that didn't happen. A lot of it was just tactic. We didn't do enough, and that's it. But no, at the end of the day, you have to win games. You don't win games, look where we're at right now after 2 seasons. So yeah.
Just real quick, I always loved how ironic it was that when you're not getting results, it's the performances that matter, but when you're having poor performances but somehow winning, it's the results that matter. That's kind of what we heard a lot from Josh Wolf, and hopefully things will be different going forward.
Yeah, I think for me is, at the end of the day, the result in soccer matters the most. Winning a game matters over averaging points per game, average points per whatever, or average this or average shots.
XG is the only thing that matters.
Yeah,
And
winning. winning is if you can win the game 2-0, 2-0, 1-0, win is a win. And if you don't get to that win, is everything you say, it's just pretty much irrelevant. My point of view.
There's a human element thing that I wanted to throw in too, that we can only judge Burrell on the results of what we see actually play out over these 18 months that he's been around. And one of the things that he's overhauled substantially is
if you can get the mic a little more closer to you.
Scouting and recruitment. So scouting and recruitment has been a big focus of his. That's a front office thing that he has done significant stuff in advance of the coaching hire. And seeing the way that they didn't have to play the game that they did in getting O'Brien in the re-entry draft the way that they did. They didn't necessarily need to jockey for first position, but to me that was making a statement to the player of, we value you, we want you here, we're not just picking you up and you're something on a spreadsheet. And that goes to some of the stuff that he's said, and something that I've seen play out over the last year and a half that is some of the progress that I've actually been able to hold on to in those more difficult moments where it's like, what else is there to talk about? And it's, look at the way that they're onboarding people like Dessler, like Usman Bukhari, like that element of things is something that I am hoping with the coach hire we're now seeing really more substantially play out across the organization, as there's an opportunity for brand new relationships between players and this coach, renewed relationships between some players who know this coach, have played against this coach, have played for this coach. In the case of Jader O'Brien, one of the things that I was actually wanting to know the most was, what is the actual relationship between Nico and Jader? And getting that answer in that initial press conference, to me, was honestly the most valuable thing that we could. Granted, yes, we have to trust him at his word that, yeah, they're best pals and they sent messages to each other, but that's the kind of thing that, it'll be pretty easy to figure out if that was not actually the truth sooner than later.
Let's hope for a better season, guys. But and I want to ask you guys a little more about your platform in this past 4 seasons. It's been where we had a introductory season. It wasn't great. Second season, we know what happened. We went to LA, some Western Conference Finals. The next 2 seasons, no playoffs. But as a platform, how do you guys manage to continue to grow, but also adapt, especially whenever every week when things don't go well, you have to communicate to your audience the bad news, or recap on some shit that happens, where I'm pretty sure for everyone, but however, sometimes it's when you're a journalist or you're a reporter, you have to be unbiased, and you have to still inform, putting aside all the results, and at the end of the day, you have to do your job. But how do you guys manage that? How do you guys balance that? How do you guys adapt? And what else have you guys learned in this 4 seasons?
I'll jump in first again. I think in terms of the question of how do we adapt, whether it's on a game-to-game basis or season over season, right? We started a little bit late compared to some of my colleagues up here at the tables. We started our podcast in the early August 2022, so one of our first episodes is what I think is a top 3 win in club history, 4-1 over LAFC, right? So we started when the vibes were the most high, and then we roll into the Western Conference Final, and of course, there were bumps along the way to that final appearance, but it's been pretty much downhill since then. And on a game-to-game basis, there's certainly days, there's Sundays where you wake up, you don't want to do a podcast. One thing we do is we rewatch every single game in the morning after all 90 minutes. And doing that after losing 5-1 to RSL in June was 0% fun, right? But just kind of I guess for us specifically, both E and I had a collegiate athletics background, and we took ass whoopings like that from time to time. And you still got to get up the next day and watch the film. You still got to get up the next day and go to practice. And unless it's the last game of the year, you got another game on the schedule, whether you can qualify for the playoffs or not. So I think that's kind of what pushes us and helps us adapt when things are not going well. When you go a month without being able to podcast or write after a win, that can take a toll on the people creating the content as well. But I think just kind of buckling down and knowing that there's a next step, focusing on that next step is kind of how we approach it, especially through these last 2 seasons where we've had those peaks and valleys, and unfortunately more of the latter.
one of the things that, as you know, the Gilligan to Phil West skipper, that I've been focusing on over the last 18 months is, as there have been those terrible games that there's always so much to talk about, right? Is trying to find those silver linings. The second team being a big one. Last season winning a championship, this season not having as good of a season, but still, for my money, being one of the best tickets in professional soccer. Third division, albeit, but professional soccer. And one of the things that, this is probably a podcast all of its own, when the striker went down, the opportunity that Phil had, having the relationships that he had built within writers who themselves were splitting off and creating their own Substacks, newsletters, and so on, was lending a different iteration of the kind of coverage that he was doing at the striker in this kind of federated sort of setup that everybody found themselves in. And that's been one of the things that it's been great for me to see as somebody who followed Phil and has been a fan of Phil's and is now working with him, is the way that he has adjusted, and also seeing the way that a bunch of other outlets have adjusted or pivoted or found themselves talking about grass for 4 months, at certain points, and finding
HOA meetings,
new things to look at as opportunities in terms of covering things. The biggest thing to me is that there, as little as many of us may actually know each other on a really close interpersonal basis, there is this consciousness of there are different people covering different beats, and there's somebody who's already doing this kind of thing. Otra por favor is doing this, and Moon Tower is doing this, and Soon Tower is covering all of the dog interviews. And there is a lot of intentionality in not stepping on toes, but that's also not to say that there's only one outlet that can cover in Spanish language, and there's only one outlet that can do a podcast that is a 90-minute recap or something like that. There are overlaps, but what I've really enjoyed in getting more aware of things, only having been doing this since Phil couldn't cover press conferences last summer, is just how naturally everybody is trying to make space for each other, and consciously, just to check, none of us are getting rich off of this, right?
Well, sorry guys.
Other than Richie. Other than Richie. Yeah.
The last 4 years, I guess we've been doing a show for longer than that.
I was going to say, we
years.
had the experience of having done this since 2019 when we didn't have any games to talk about.
Right.
So like losses are better than nothing.
Yeah.
Just 3 podcast names ago. So.
Yeah.
But the experience of going from being able to name the downloads, like this is Katie, this is Jay Torres, this is whoever, like we could name them.
This is that one guy in Ireland.
Yeah. 2 people in Korea for whatever reason. But from that experience to 2022, when we start seeing attention go way up, and then just like the feeling of a little bit of pressure on it, a little bit of like expectation, and then going from that to 2023 and just all of like the negativity and like really bad vibes that were in the fan base. It's been a good lesson for me as far as like, this is the thing that Richie's talked about on his shows, like mental health, like taking care of yourself. Like I think 2023 was a really big lesson for me in that we're like, none of us except for Eric is like getting a real paycheck doing this. And Eric may argue it's not a real paycheck.
He gets the real paycheck for the Olympics.
Yeah, that's it. But like, just to remember, like, one of the coolest things about any of this is the community. Don't build your identity in the results on the field, but in the cool people that you've met. And then also, making the show fun to make. If we make it fun to make, people will still have fun listening to it.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to skew positive for the sake of skewing positive. We want to be honest and realistic. But trying to find little stupid, silly ways of making it fun to do while doing that.
Something that you struck a chord with me, Landon, was the community aspect of this. When Lobar and I, and Logan Jones at the time, who was living down in San Antonio, God bless him, man. He's like a super fan to like drive up 35. I could never, for every game, and it was just the three of us were like, well, you know what? We have a friend here, Logan Bartlett, who hasn't really followed soccer before, and we figured this would be a good opportunity for him to kind of come on as like a, hey, like, so can I ask this question about how soccer is? Why is Josh Wolf doing this? And it was like, it made a good outlet for us to kind of go and from an educational perspective, like, hey, this is what's happening, especially during a down year, and 23 was when we started. But I think quickly we realized that the community was really open to like just getting as much content as possible. And again, to your point, Landon, about making it fun and not letting it consume your identity, because like that's a really easy thing for a lot of fans to get into. But it was just something for us where it was like, hey, there's also other things happening around the city, like Austin Rise. My wife was playing for them at the time, and so we thought it would be a good opportunity for us to start maybe like carving out a little bit of time for like the women's game here in the city. And since then, it's kind of grown to covering, NWSL and like USL Super League and stuff like that. So from that aspect, it's been cool. But also to Moisés' perspective or comment about intentionally making space for everyone's, beat, so to speak, it's been really cool. So
There's sorry. So I whenever there's two things that I always strike the chord with people. Sometimes people that watch this sport for years, and sometimes people that are getting in the sport, right? One is the ones that watch the sport for years, they want something that they've seen in the past, European, Mexican league, something like that. And how can you, in your own way, bring Austin FC into that type of form of language, like, talking about it, like in that perspective. But also whenever I hear people talk about, oh, well, there's people that go to the stadium and they're just fans that pay for the ticket to go to the party, but not know about the game. And I'm like, well, if you have an outlet, you have a media outlet, and you communicate to people, your damn job is to go and teach them what the game is about with your information, with your knowledge of the game. That's where you have an outlet. Like, it's your job to make sure you get as many audience you can from like a team that we all cover. But if you're shading on someone because they don't know the sport, then there's something wrong with you, bro. Not something wrong with what's going on in the environment. Because at the end of the day, like, the results are not up to us. We wish that the team could win every game, right? But they don't. However, I've always thought about that as like, anytime someone doesn't know anything, that's an opportunity to, like, this is where it grows. Like, this is where people understand more about it, because then they're gonna learn it from you. They're gonna learn from you, from whoever, from Moisés. And I think for me, that's one thing that I've seen is that there's been a lot of people that, like, I go to my wife's office sometimes, and her boss is talking to me about the games, and he just started watching the Austin FC games a couple years ago. First time ever watching like soccer, and he buys season tickets. So it's like, how can you get this person to buy tickets to, okay, the results are not there, but there's people behind the scenes that are putting in some work and effort and communicating everything they can. And I've now heard him say, like, man, you guys, the media, like, you guys behind the scenes are doing great because you guys are making it easiest to digest, especially with shitty results.
I'll say I don't feel like it's necessarily our job to, like, proselytize to these people.
Yeah.
Right. I think at the minimum, fans need to be welcoming to those people, and because MLS teams need those people.
Exactly.
Like, all 20,000 or whatever stadium you're in is not going to be hardcore soccer fans who know exactly what's going on. But American soccer needs those people to come, and then if they come interested, they find one of us, we'll hopefully can share some insight with them. But I think it's going to be like their kids who they keep bringing every week. In 30 years, those are going to be the ones that, like, build American soccer culture. And so I don't feel like any of us or any fan should put the pressure on that they're the ones who have to build American soccer culture by, like, finding people and bringing them in. If you want to do that and you believe in that, go for it. But the bare minimum is just, like, if the new people are sitting next to you at the stadium, be nice to them.
Yeah, be
and,
cool.
Like, the guy at work asks you about the game. Talk to him about it. Answer questions. Like, we need that in this country. Frankly, like we can't.
Why does the band play the whole time?
Yeah. we can't afford to be gatekeepers in this country if we want to have like a really strong culture at some point.
So, like, exactly to that point, like the position I'm in, I write a column in an alt weekly newspaper in Austin that people go to for politics, for music recs. I mean, I think my column's the only sports coverage that the Chronicle does on any kind of regular basis. So, with that in mind, you know, I'm often speaking to that subset of the not even necessarily the fan base, but that subset of Austinites that are proud of, you know, anything related to this community, and Austin FC is certainly part of that. And you know, explaining, if you are going to choose to care, here's what you might be caring about in this given week. And I made the decision, you know, very early on that I was not going to become an Austin FC fan, and I was going to do my coverage from the standpoint of a neutral, objective observer. And now I have my own biases, and I certainly try to like inject that just from where I stand in my own personality. That's one of the blessings of not having to write for like the Statesman or a mainstream outlet where, you know, you have to be 100% to the T professional. Like I do get a lot of license to take things like I can write a satire column like last week. And so I also have never asked to see any numbers about who's reading what, because I feel like it's all out of my hands, and I don't really want to know.
That's a great idea, Eric.
Yeah.
I know.
So yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I'm so thankful to anyone who does read, but it's not something that I keep track of because I just want to keep it real as much as I can. You know, I've been entrusted by my editors at the Chronicle that they feel like my voice and perspective is something they want to feature, so I'm just going to give that as best I can, as, you know, unfiltered as I can. And it's been so much fun, and I've met so many great people, a lot of people at this table that, you know, through that process, and that's why. And so, you know, when the product on the field, it obviously affects the subject matter of what I'm going to write about, but it very rarely affects the enjoyment that I get, or you know, whether like my motivation to do it, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be getting to write about soccer, whether the team's winning or losing, and that is just a really cool thing that I try not to take for granted.
Okay.
Yeah, Richie, I think it hits up actually the last two questions, the fact that we're all around this table, and like I don't feel like anybody here, I feel like everybody here is a part of the community and nobody here is competition. Like I don't, you know, it's not like, oh God, these guys
man,
got
those
that
better depend upon those guys.
You know, these got that coach or that player, you know, or got what are they doing on downloads, or what does the social media look like versus, like, it's all like, this is a big enough tent that we can all be together, and we can all succeed, and we can all have a good time, like hanging out and have beers and talk soccer.
I think it's a big enough tent because it's a small tent.
Yeah.
I mean,
that
that
makes sense. Like,
well, yeah.
if there was two jobs in town and we're all fighting for them, it might be differently. But
Right.
American soccer is that way, where it's like nobody's getting rich off of it. Let's all just play nice together and like enjoy this and try to be a community.
Well, to use a very recent example, following the press conference, you guys and We Are Austin both got exclusive sit-downs with the new coach that nobody else got. And I sensed like a weird energy from the team comm staff as some of us were leaving and We Are Austin was arriving, where it was like, oh, people are going to be upset about this. I was overjoyed.
Yeah.
I was thrilled. It was really cool to see. Because one of the big things that I have been incredibly vocal to an annoying extent about is feeling that the club has not done enough outreach to specifically fan-focused media. And that isn't to say that all of us aren't, in some respect, fan-focused media. But Moontower and We Are Austin have the track records, have the community roots that's what they needed to do for their purpose, you know, corporate-wise, and for the benefit of exactly what you were getting to, Jeremiah, that this is something that nobody wants this experiment to fail, right? You know, we could take the incredibly impartial and super objective Eric Goodman stance and have no passionate feelings about anything whatsoever, other than their satirical bent. But at the end of the day, I think that what we're seeing is bearing out a lot of investment that a lot of us have put into this over the last however many years we've been involved, either covering the club as fans, just observing the club, any combination of that is honestly why I'm always annoying, but now I feel like I'm like the annoying optimistic evangelist of this could work, this community could work, it doesn't have to burn itself down like various other fan bases have. Look at Look at what's happened in Seattle and various other places where a lot of things are very front office driven because the really passionate people fell by the wayside.
I think, Paul, did you get a chance to talk about this point?
I mean, I think a lot of folks have said really good things. I will just add one quick thing as a member of like La Murga, and kind of seeing the supporter culture from that aspect. I think it's been really cool because like there was a thing that Landon had said about like, you know, if someone is new to to the game for the first time or whatever, it's like, hey, here's the QR code for all the chants and all that stuff, and be prepared to like do some of these things, or don't get shocked if you get wet, you know, by the beer showers. But I think from that perspective, it's important, you know, if I have that context, to be able to share that on the platform, which we have on occasion, you know, whenever Murder comes out with new chants and stuff like that, we've tried to share that out. And so, yeah, besides that, I think all really good points.
One, you know, going into the aspect of now comes to communicating to community, some of us do get access to have a media credential, whether it's photography or in the press box. It's a responsibility. For Eric Goodman, it's your job. For us, we're trying to make it our job.
To be clear, it is a side gig.
A side gig.
Fortunately, my full income is not Austin FC coverage, as much as I would love that to be the case.
Those are goals right there. But going into that, like that aspect, how do you manage to find ways to connect with your audience? How do you manage to get them engaged to what you're saying, get them engaged to, at the end of the day, like we're growing a culture, we're looking out for each other's platforms, we're looking each other like out to each other, like to grow each of our platforms. But how do you manage to find ways to communicate to them and, you know, manage also the responsibility of, hey, you're in front of a player, in front of a coach, and you're actually able to ask them questions. Like you can ask those questions for someone that doesn't have that access. How do you manage to do that, and then also find ways to do it with your own style? If the question makes any sense, or if it doesn't make sense, let me know. I can reward it.
I think you hit on the most important thing. I think we all, and we started this in 2019 because we knew we were going to be really bad at it for a while, and we wanted to have like bad shows where only our friends and neighbors were listening, and then we would get good at it. But the most important thing is like finding your own voice, right, and being authentic to it, and knowing like this is how, you know, this is our take on the team. This is like the way we're going to be. You know, we're going to be. We talk about being like somewhere in, but like we're not journalists and we're not really analysts, but like we're kind of somewhere in the middle, you know. And so like, how do we help, you know, bring people along that listen and sort of have that perspective? So I think like knowing who you are, knowing what you know, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're not good at, like knowing, you know, we're not going to do like wacky FM DJ kind of questions to players, right? Because that's not who we are. And if somebody does that and that's like their thing, like that's fine. But I think it's the most important thing is to find out who you are and how you connect with your audience, then be authentic to that audience.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that, it's taking, you know, obviously your interest within that niche, so to speak. So like with soccer, I really like the supporter aspect of it. And I also just like this city. You know, I'm a native Austinite, and so I'm very proud of the club, good or bad, you know. And so there are also things to take away from that where as a sports guy, it's like, well, UT's doing good. We haven't been good in a while. Let's touch on that for a little bit, you know. We like to cover other clubs. Well, really just one other club, which is Chelsea, because that's our EPL club. And so injecting those bits of personality helps us connect with, you know, the folks that listen, because, you know, we want to be able to have that opportunity to like interface beyond just Austin FC. And so that, you know, we wanted to wait until a few, you know, months at doing this have passed before trying to do like an in-life or IRL event. And so, you know, we're looking forward to this off-season to be able to actually get a chance to do that. And so we'll hopefully have some more details coming out then. But, you know.
It does mean you're a very online person if you like use IRL to mean like
Right.
Also a live show is what we could call it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I think we're somewhat similar, right? We got started a little bit later than some of our friends sitting here at the table, and don't have media access than maybe we would have gotten if we started before the inaugural season. But I think that the community that has sprung up just around our own show with the North End podcast and people coming up to you at games and being like, are you Zach, are you North End podcast? It's not that recognition. It's that what they say after, like, I really love the podcast. It helps me, like, it aids my fandom here, right? It adds to my experience as an Austin FC fan. Whether we're winning or losing, that's probably the most rewarding part of it. So, like, not having that access to be able to, like you guys said, like, ask the questions and kind of stand in for people that you do know in the community, the things that they want to know from the coach, know from the players. We try to pivot and have kind of what we just call the nonsense, right? We just started our third annual, right, goal of the year bracket, right? We make this March Madness style bracket. We allow fans to go vote on it. So northendpodcast.com, you can go vote right now. But it's like, it's the best ball league we have with Moon Tower and the Verde Pendant and Verde All Day and expansion, maybe some Pro Rel, Goodman and Ultra por favor. But it's like, it's those little things that kind of as a secondary outlet, right, with no media access, that you have to kind of not go the extra mile, but pivot and change and kind of be a little bit more creative and find something that mixes well with what, like, my co-host and I do, is like be sports nerds and fantasy sports nerds
and betting and all that
exactly. And we add that kind of stuff into our podcast because I know there's a subset of the Austin FC fan community that is also interested in putting a few shekels down on the game every Saturday, right? Or, you know, paying attention to our silly best ball league that doesn't mean anything, but we get some trash talk, we get some content out of it, things like that. So, you know, to get the feedback from people who do listen, that kind of stuff is really rewarding.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it would basically, I guess, just boil down to relationships and reputation. And those relationships are mainly with, you know, people in the press box that I've become great friends with, and is really kind of the highlight of this whole experience is you know, getting to know other people really interested in soccer and maybe coming from a journalistic background, so we have something in common with that. And then in terms of just the reputation is like I said, like I'm going to try to be consistent in terms of the perspective I bring. I want to be somebody that's not afraid to ask a tough question when the timing calls for it. I mean, a lot of people, you know, I think my name was made to begin with in season 1 when Josh Wolf called one of my questions bullshit, which, you know, was kind of an instigation of that reputation that. Yeah, and by the way, I think that was Josh very quickly realized that I'm not among his biggest problems in those environments.
I meant that if somebody
You don't
else.
say.
Yeah. Whoever that might be.
But you know, still, like, if that helped people recognize that, like, hey, Goodman's going to be, you know, there and not afraid to, you know, call out when something is going very poorly or the, you know, players are not playing up to their standard. That's kind of just that reputation that hopefully leads to some more trust and connection with the content on a weekly basis.
So I'm in the unique position of, prior to last summer, the entirety of my journalistic career was in entertainment with a smattering of politics, and soccer's just the sport that I care about. You know, will I watch basketball if it's on? Sure. Do I watch the Olympics? Yeah. But watching Liga MX on Univision with my dad growing up, even though we didn't pick a team because we're Cuban and not Mexican, we just enjoyed what was going on, whether it was Liga MX, whether it was South American stuff. Didn't matter. It was soccer. It was in Spanish. And, you know, I love the sport. And when the opportunity to help revitalize the striker came about on the business development side of things, I was like, great, cool. And then I found myself going, so Phil, when it comes to podcasting, we could do this and this and this. And then when the striker went under, it turned into, so I am all about the Phil West brand, because this community having access to Phil West is an asset, and it's something that needs to be properly highlighted. And I was like, you could start doing a podcast. Doesn't have to be with me, but I've got podcast producing experience. We can find the right partner for it. But think of it as like the director's commentary of your column, and you're still filing stuff the way that you always ever did, and delivering that kind of traditional sports journalistic experience. And let's just figure out the way to translate that. And part of the kind of community awareness stuff that I mentioned earlier was when we decided to start doing Emergency Podcast, it was, how do we do this in a way that is not creating yet another thing that is coming out on the exact same schedule as other shows and covering the exact same ground as other shows, but is still adding something to the conversation, is doing something conversational, doing something that people who want the kind of product that Phil's producing can pay attention to without it being a retread of, what Moontower is covered in a given week. So I have to listen to Moontower on a delay, and other shows as well, because I don't want that kind of cross-pollination contamination to go into effect. But I think the thing that we've been looking at with Verde All Day is how can Ambassador Phil, be of most service to the rest of the environment that wants to get along with Phil. Not to say that everybody wants to get along with Phil. And that's been an interesting journey over the last year or so, is navigating what pre-existing relationships that are, half a decade long in some cases, that I was just coming into barely aware of drama or interpersonal, conflicts or any of that kind of stuff. And it's been interesting navigating those waters alongside Phil, who, with few exceptions, it's difficult for somebody to go, oh, Phil West, that jerk who wrote a book on U.S. soccer twice. What a jerk. He hates the sport. What a terrible person to be affiliated with. That's been something that I've tried to be as cognizant of the privilege of being associated with Phil West that I can, while at the same time trying to help him nudge at bucking various trends and leveraging the stature that he has in the community when it comes to trying to broaden the access that other outlets get. Because everybody who goes in to interview a given player or a given coach or whoever is going to get something different out of them. And it's not something that I feel I can comfortably speak for Phil, that he does not feel is something that is just stark competition. Everybody should pull out their knives and be trying to cut each other. And it's been really great seeing that as the club itself is in a period of transition, that's extending to the way that we're all finding ways to jockey for the additional access that we need, the additional consideration that we need, because sometimes, you get stigmatized a certain way, as Goodman has experienced, and that's a thing that you have to break out of. And it's been interesting seeing that from the limited amount of data that I've been able to gather over the last year and a half.
Okay, but the last public soccer game I went to watch party I went to before the pandemic, Phil West was in that Atletico jersey at a Liverpool bar and talked crazy shit when they beat Liverpool in Champions League, and I started the "fuck you, Phil" chant, which went through all of BD Riley's. So I'm just saying,
historically,
Phil's got fans, and yeah.
When La Liga's involved,
yeah, he's got haters too.
It's fine you didn't have a recording of that, because I know you guys need a new outro now.
We do. We need a new outro.
He's saved in my phone as "F you, Phil" to this day. Is how he comes up.
Do you get a chance to talk, Logan?
I don't have anything
No.
important to add.
He's just having a good time.
So speaking of good time, one thing that I've done, right, and this goes into how do we make this grow, and like he was saying, how can you? It's like, yes, you have to look out for yourself, but also expand as much as you can, because everybody has something different or get something different from the club to our platforms. But let's say this year I've gotten to collaborate with Phil on giving them the photos for articles, and then with the club, there's a song, an artist that's gonna release a song in Spanish about the club in a couple of months, and the artist was actually an Otra before that, but he's connected with a friend of ours that it's all based on connections and networking. I think for me, what I enjoy the most is just that aspect. Forget the players. I mean, guys, I love you guys. I love everybody in the team. But at the end of the day, I'm not here to be friends with the players. I'm here to be friends with my colleagues next to me. Whether we agree on something or not, not friends, but more acquaintances, where when we see each other, hey, how is everything? Or I like what you said. Can you give me a little more of what was the question about or whatnot? That's what I'm looking forward to the most. But just having this type of talks with people like you guys, it means a lot, because one, I feel like we're helping the media of Austin grow. Okay, that's always, for me, every time I go somewhere, whether I've been in Galveston, Houston, or even LA, and here is, how can you contribute to whatever you're doing? How can you make that shit grow? Because other media outlets, like in LA, for example, they have a shit ton of people that they're always working together, and that's why it's big. So for me, it's that's my competition right there. Not you guys. Those motherfuckers are who I want to be, going at it. And, and now when it comes to numbers, right now they're getting us, but in the future we'll get them. So how do you guys want to see Austin media grow? Like, what do you guys, look forward to the environment that we have in our own ways?
I mean, genuinely, this might not be what you were thinking, but I would actually love to see a little bit more of the mainstream participation from the legacy outlets that, and a lot of, and listen, the reality is there's, even though Q2 Stadium is on this Fugazi sellout streak that is clearly...
I don't know what you're talking about. Goodman, I've seen 20,738 bodies in that stadium.
Even if that were true, there's one thing to have a ticket and go to the game. It's another thing to be interested enough to A, watch the away matches on Apple TV, and then B, engage with, coverage in the middle of the week. And they're clearly, as you can see by kind of the legacy media and their behavior, always favoring UT, very rarely investing. I mean, the Statesman finally, this season made Colby Gordon a full-time, staff member after years of just having, somebody freelancing for them and sometimes not even covering games. So they're obviously going to follow where the eyeballs are. And it would be great for this community to be a little bit more interested on like the day-to-day level, or at least take more of a interest in Austin FC besides just showing up to the games when they feel like it. But if we can see more of that, I think that's a great sign for everybody. And then it even enhances the value of these, more alternative, like grassroots media that are bringing their own perspectives to the table, because you do need to have the hardcore baseline legacy media. I do think there's still a role for that.
Yeah, I think like if you got more eyes with the legacy media, that's how some of the fans that the club maybe hasn't captured yet can also filter through and find some of our outlets as well. That those grassroots projects that you mentioned. So I wholeheartedly agree with that, and I didn't know that they made Colby full time, but that is good to hear.
It's often been me and Colby by ourselves at those midweek pressers, and I'd like to thank the Statesman for making me not so lonely. A couple things came to mind actually that I didn't come into this planning to bring up, but I mean it's visible that there are no women sitting at either one of these tables. However, there are two women who regularly cover the club, Michelle and Laura. They were originally going to be part of a Spanish language media focused roundtable. But even if they were here with us, the inclusivity aspect to the voices that are covering the club, it would be great if there were a greater diversity of those voices. At the same time, as was so validly brought up, fighting UT is going to always be an eternal push and pull. And MLS can have the craziest jump on when the NCAA schedule is, and there are certain things that can't be helped when it comes to Austin FC home games and UT home games coinciding, and then other big games that are bigger than soccer is to a lot of people in the United States. So like there are a lot of things that are out of our hands, but one of the things that I've appreciated seeing from my colleagues is boosting of, for example, Michelle and Laura's coverage, where they've been two of the most steadfast journalists covering the club practically since inception. And similarly, there's a lot of stuff that's been organically happening that I think is good. That isn't to say that it's gone far enough. But I mean, to Richie's point earlier, the more collaboration, the more visibility that the interested fan base has to the media outlets that are out here that are covering things, the more opportunity incentive there is for people to, in most cases, donate a bunch of free time that they're not getting compensated for to generate the kind of content, generate the outlets that people might be hungering for and that don't necessarily, exist in a really prominent way.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we can all do, we can all take it out here to be better about. One, way back, I remember interviewing Eric Goodman when he was at the airport, and we would have to he would have to mute and stop answering when the announcements came out. So we've always tried to have as many people as possible. To your point about having Michelle, having Laura, having more diverse voices on. And the other thing that we did fairly recently was talk to Trevor Scott, who's a lifestyle TV guy, right? We had him on, and he's a big fan. I know he has you on his show, and I think as we look out there, there there are people in like broader Austin culture. I was watching the ATX drinker today who like was wearing an Austin FC hat, right? There are people that we can tap into, and I think that we all need to, especially during the off season when we don't have games to talk about. Like, find that broader community to bring those casuals in, because I think this is we've talked about this many times tonight. Like, it's a very inclusive environment, and none of us are gatekeepers, and we all want this community to grow. And I think the way that grows is by finding people who are on the edges, who are interested, who maybe are in that 20,738 that buy tickets and then they go to the wine festival and they don't make it, or whatever. But like, those people are out there, right? And it's on us to find those people and bring those into the tent. And I think that's something we can do from here going forward.
Shout out ATX Drinker and go Knicks.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is even the right place for this, but Eric, you mentioned mainstream local media covering the team more. Part of that is, like, I think with the growth of soccer in the country, some of that will come. Do you think there's a responsibility on those outlets to kind of be the tail wagging the dog a little bit and like put more resources or time into covering the team so that it does become a thing that's worth their time to cover?
Yeah, that's so tough to answer because everybody, I mean, at that point, that is people's full-time jobs. That is what they do. So, I don't know how much leeway you have to really say, all right, let's take 10 minutes out of our 30-minute news, sports weekly newscast and talk about Austin FC. They might not have that leeway. It probably has to come from the leadership level. If, let's say, the sports editor of the Statesman, who's, I'm not even sure if they have one at this moment, actually, but like, it would have to come from that level. And sure, I think any good sports reporter is going to see the value in the city's only major league sports team that clearly has a passionate, I mean, you could walk around any part of town and you will see at least one Austin FC crest on a hat or on a shirt. Like, it is a thing here that people care about. And so, yeah, there probably is a resistance just based on habit against giving it the coverage that it might deserve. But the reality is also a part of that is the play on the field. And a losing team is not going to get coverage the way that a winning team will. And so that's where the club has to take some of the responsibility. And by making a change at coach, clearly, they recognize that and are trying to get back to that point. Because 2022, you were seeing Austin FC on all over the place. Like, that's when
everywhere.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
That's when I was on We Are Austin, all the time. And that's when, obviously, the fan base, the city's going to be the most engaged.
So what you're saying is this is all on Nico Estévez.
What I'm saying is Nico Estévez can do himself a lot of good by, first of all, doing exactly what he's doing, trying to, just up his, Q rating and his personal likability brand. But, yes, eventually the team is going to have to win games consistently for people for the club to be more than just a niche interest here in Austin.
Well, and I think the other thing too is we have to remember this is year 5 of a 100-year war, right?
Matthew.
And
Thank you, McConaughey.
and that is the struggle that we're going to face in the early years, so to speak. And so because you look at UT, I mean, there was a whole decade of mediocrity happening at DKR that was still, commanding a lot of time, with legacy media here in Austin. But it's just going to take time for us to kind of build that rapport, like you were saying, and make folks take notice. But that's an excellent point.
But also, there is, when you get to that 5-year mark, where it has the opposite effect. Like, the curiosity factor is totally gone.
Correct.
There's no newness anymore. So. Nobody is going to be just parachuting in to see what's this all about at this point.
Right.
So it really does become putting a product out there that people want to engage with, consistently.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've always been thought of. Hey, if you can have the amazing. I mean, Austin FC has amazing marketing, video quality is for me the best in the league. Photos with the Jacob, they're doing great. But when you're not giving the audience and your consumer the product that they need to see with a winning team, it's gonna be tough to keep that audience wanting to come. Look at what happened in the last game. A lot of faces that didn't come because of Wolf ended up coming because of Wolf not being there. That says a lot of, hey, if you're giving, and then the team won. So you're giving the people those vibes that they got in the last game of the season. I mean, Nico is gonna be, having a very, very good spot in Austin from now on, and not have to wait to sit on that table because hey, Nico, come over here and sit down, because it's gonna happen. People are gonna appreciate his work. They're gonna appreciate him as a person, but that has to come with results at the end of the day, because you can't just be Mr. Oh, hey guys, everybody, I'm here. But you have to win games, and if you win games, then you're Gucci.
Winning cures everything, though, right?
Yes.
But what it can't be is the fits and starts, right? Because it can be as quick for a vibe shift. 5 days, you beat Pumas, you beat Monterrey, and all of a sudden we're thinking, oh man, we might make the playoffs.
But
it's got to be consistent,
yeah.
And not just throughout one season. But like Roto has said, right, he's building something to last, and that's what the fan base to continue to grow, right? And therefore helping us grow what we're putting out there as content creators. It's got to be consistent winning. You can't. Again, it's not a novel idea, but when there's 15 teams as of next year in each conference, 9 of them make the playoffs, you can't miss.
Yeah.
You cannot miss. And that's where the attention just starts to go away, especially in a city where this is the only professional sports team, but UT might as well be one. And we know from that last day of the regular season, there's plenty of other things to do in Austin, Texas, rather than go watch a 10th place team in MLS, right?
To your point,
Yeah.
I feel like that consistency, it's got to come from us, but, and the front office is super thrilled when I say stuff like this. I think they could do a better job of investing in highlighting their community in the content that they're producing for MLS Season Pass, that they're producing for their YouTube channel. There is something that we are, in a way, riding the coattails of their example. Not saying that we should be doing, super club-friendly, patter kind of stuff, but there needs to be some more output. Like, we saw a bit of that when Season Pass launched, where they were utterly making every other club in the league look like total clowns. And I think that, a piece of it might have been the decreased, results on the field. Some of it might have been maybe that money spigot from the Season Pass side of things wasn't as open as they were initially led to believe that it would be. But that's something that would help. Not to say that they have an unlimited budget, which everybody who thinks that they do would love for them to buy out every most expensive player immediately because, money falls from the sky. But that's something that I feel like, looking at this reset, recalibration, second rebuild year in a row, that would help what we're all doing from within the community in terms of giving them something to pay attention to in independent media that feels like it's part of something. Even if the results are lacking on the field, there's culture stuff that is going on that, especially being in Murga, Paul, like, as dreary as some of those games might have been, the heartbeat didn't stop.
Right.
It kept going. And that was the thing that I felt was a big miss this season. But at the same time, look, we're all human beings. I got to have some sense of empathy somewhere in the deep pits of my soul. I get that this season was a lot for a lot of people. A lot of people facing a lot of uncertain futures. And my hope is that's one of the big things that we see change in 2025 that will help make our jobs a lot easier.
I think what you're saying is, let Swoontower interview Mikael Dessler's dog.
Nice. Well, guys, thank you guys for being here. Do you guys have any final thoughts of this conversation? You guys can say it right now. And while you're thinking, you guys can share your platform where they can find you on social media, and also your bank account. Now just share your media outlets and your socials.
All right, well, I'll go first again here.
He's a leader.
Yeah. I'm Zac Graham. I do the North End podcast with my buddy Ian Michaud. Find us at the North End Pod on Twitter if you're still hanging around those parts. At the North End Podcast, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, Blue Sky, all that good stuff. TheNorthEndPodcast.com. You can go vote on the first round matchups for the 2024 Austin FC Goal of the Year. And I just want to point out, while we're we're recording here that Houston just picked up a red card, so I'm hoping that maybe we see them eliminated here before we stop recording. Because, well, Houston. There you go.
Yeah, what's up, everyone? This is Paul, aka Low Paul. My buddy Logan Bartlett and I, we do the Verde Penic podcast, and it's available anywhere you can get your podcast from. Find us at the Verde Pendant on Twitter. That's exclusively like this spot that we do our things because it's easy. Yeah, that's it.
Where's the low come from?
So there were two Logans,
right? Yeah.
And so it was Logan Bartlett
Right.
and Logan Jones, and so
Right.
he was Lojo, and then I just
So you
wanted
just-
to fit in.
you just wanted to fit in. All right.
So yeah, because we didn't want
That's
it to
valid.
be Logan Paul. So
That's
For reasons, yeah, for sure. Yeah, Jeremiah Bentley, JBentley_ATX everywhere. Also at Moon Tower Soccer. I would listen to and love Soccer Wise, and every time they talk about you should sign up for Patreon because we have these salary spreadsheets to talk about all this stuff. I'm like, we got that in Austin. Like you guys at the North End are nailing
I should have
it.
said
So,
that, yeah.
Like lead with that. Like if you do nothing, I mean, you should download and subscribe and listen. But if you do nothing else, like you want to know what's going on with salaries, players in Austin, like check out the North.
If you're into the salary cap stuff or you want to learn more about that, it is not simple. It's very complicated in MLS, but we do our best to try to break it down for everybody and make it digestible. So you can go to the team page for that, but we've got pretty colors, we've got extra spreadsheets. It's all great. NorthEndPodcast.com. Professional show.
Yeah. Merrick Goodman at Goodman on Twitter. Austin.
Best Twitter handle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Austin Chronicle is by a front door near you at a local establishment, and very proud to be part of a healthy and lively press corps that covers U.S. soccer, which still feels like something that makes you a little bit of a weirdo, especially in the sports landscape. But that feeling is decreasing. So and getting to chat with all you guys definitely makes it feel very validating in a certain standpoint. But yeah, so appreciate anybody who's picking it up that car.
I'm Landon Cotham. I'm on Jeremiah Bentley's podcast, which is called Moon Tower Soccer.
Moisés Chiullán. I'm at Moisés Chiu, Chiu, MoISESCHIU on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, Mastodon, everything.
Parlor.
Parlor, no. Parlor,
Truth Social.
Truth Social. Strangely enough, also not on Truth Social. I don't know how
OnlyFans.
that happened. But that, if you don't
Do
like
you have
left-leaning
an
politics,
OnlyFans?
you don't want to follow me on social media. I don't have an OnlyFans yet. The Verde All Day Substack, verdeallday.substack.com. Phil Rest writes the vast majority of that, and occasionally I'll do weird, hey, what if the MLS Next Pro PK shootouts had been part of the top league? How would that have potentially affected the playoff slots? And it didn't turn out the way I thought. But the vast majority of the posts there, including at the whistle after every game, are free. But there is some stuff that goes behind the paywall. But it's a great source of the one and only Mr. Phil West's voice. He's at Phil West on Twitter and on Threads. And yeah, I don't have anything else to promote other than to say that anybody who is into this team, into following this team, try the whole panoply of different publications and podcasts and YouTube shows and everything that maybe you have never tried, maybe you have only tried once and fell off of. Everybody deserves another shot, especially as we're all doing that with the team.
Once again, thank you guys. Check us out. Check everybody that's in here out. Check the platforms out. And you guys know I'm Richie, Otra por favor, and all the social media outlets. Well, like I always say to everybody, se cuidan, se portan bien, y arriba el América. America is the best team in the world. And all that.
thank you, Richie.
Thanks, Richie.
Sweet.
This episode brought to you by Caliente.mx.
Estrella Jalisco.